Most gardens have a season. Spring arrives and things wake up. Summer brings the peak of it. Fall delivers the last act. And then winter comes, and what you are left with is structure and bare soil and the quiet that asks you to wait. But there is another kind of garden, one that does not have a season in that way. One where something is always green, always present, always covering the ground and filling the eye regardless of what month the calendar says. A garden that never fully goes to sleep. And it is built from a specific category of plant that most gardeners have never deliberately assembled. Plants that are fast-growing, self-spreading, and genuinely evergreen or semi-evergreen throughout the year. Today I am going to walk you through those plants. Not just which ones work, but why they work, how they spread, what makes them stay green when everything around them goes bare, and how to put them together in a way that creates a garden with genuine year-round presence. This is not a list of the usual suspects. Some of these will be familiar. Some will be plants you have driven past your whole life without knowing what they were. All of them will change how you think about what a year-round garden can actually look like. Let us start with the spreading mechanism, because understanding how these plants move is what lets you use them strategically rather than reactively. These plants spread through several different mechanisms. Some use rhizomes, underground horizontal stems that push outward through the soil and produce new shoots at intervals, creating colonies that expand steadily year after year. Rhizome spreaders are typically the most reliable for covering large areas over time because their expansion happens below the soil surface, protected from disturbance and able to advance even through conditions that would slow above-ground growth. Some use stolons, surface-running stems that root themselves wherever they touch the ground, covering surfaces rapidly and binding soil as they go. Stolon spreaders establish initial coverage fastest because rooting happens simultaneously across the entire advancing surface. Some self-seed, producing offspring in the surrounding area that naturalize into drifts, and some produce large, vigorous clumps that divide and expand their footprint steadily over years. Understanding which mechanism a plant uses tells you where it will go, how fast, and how to contain it or encourage it depending on what your garden needs. Plant 1 is creeping phlox. Phlox subulata is the plant that does something in April and May that almost nothing else in the early spring garden can match. It covers the ground with the most vivid, dense, continuous color display available at that time of year. Electric pink, deep magenta, pure white, soft lavender, cascading across slopes and over walls and along pathway edges in what looks like a living waterfall of bloom. But what makes creeping phlox earn its place on a year-round list is what it does after those flowers finish. The foliage stays, evergreen, fine-textured, dense, covering the ground completely through summer, fall, and winter, providing exactly the kind of year-round green coverage that distinguishes this list from a list of merely pretty spring plants. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. The spreading mechanism is aerial rooting along trailing stems, meaning the stems creep outward across the soil surface and root themselves at multiple contact points as they travel, creating a dense, weed-suppressing mat. Coverage rate is approximately 2 feet of lateral expansion per season from an established plant. Planted on slopes along rock garden faces at the front of retaining walls, on pathway edges or in erosion-prone areas where the rooting mat will bind the soil as it spreads. Full sun to light shade. After bloom, shear lightly to keep the center from going woody and to encourage denser spread the following season. That single annual cut is the complete maintenance requirement. Plant 2 is ajuga, bugleweed. Ajuga reptans is the answer to the question that gardeners with heavily shaded areas under large trees ask every year. What will actually grow here, stay green all year, suppress weeds, and look genuinely beautiful? Ajuga answers every part of that question simultaneously. It spreads through stolons, surface stems that root themselves wherever they touch soil, creating a carpet of rosettes that expands outward at a rate that makes rapid ground coverage genuinely achievable. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Evergreen to semi-evergreen depending on winter severity. The foliage comes in extraordinary variety. Chocolate chip produces tiny, dark burgundy bronze leaves that create a mosaic effect. Burgundy glow has variegated leaves combining pink, white, and purple in a pattern that looks deliberately artistic. Black scallop produces deep, glossy, nearly black-purple foliage that is among the most visually dramatic ground cover options available anywhere. In late spring, short spikes of vivid blue-purple flowers rise above the foliage, genuinely beautiful and highly attractive to bumblebees. Ajuga tolerates dry shade more effectively than almost any other spreading perennial, which makes it the specific solution for the dry root zones under large established trees where nothing else wants to grow. Plant 3 is creeping jenny, Lysimachia numularia, specifically the aurea variety with its brilliant chartreuse gold rounded leaves. It roots aerially at every node as it travels, creating dense, bright coverage at a speed that genuinely surprises most gardeners the first time they grow it. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. It handles shade, partial shade, and moist conditions that challenge most other ground covers, making it the solution for low spots, pond edges, areas where drainage is inconsistent, and the persistently damp corners that are almost impossible to plant successfully with standard perennials. The chartreuse gold color of aurea does something visually significant in shaded garden spaces. It makes them feel brighter, lighter, more alive. Green ground covers in shade create a subdued effect. Chartreuse ground covers in shade create a luminous effect, as if the light is being generated from below rather than absorbed. In year-round garden design, this quality makes creeping jenny irreplaceable for shaded areas where visual energy needs to be maintained through the winter months when overhead canopy is gone and other ground-level interest has disappeared. It is, in a very practical sense, the plant that keeps shaded corners from looking abandoned in December. Plant 4 is lamb's ear, Stachys byzantina. The dense silver-white woolly surface of the leaves is not decorative in origin. It is a biological moisture management system that evolved on rocky, sun-baked hillsides in Turkey and Iran. Each hair reflects sunlight, reduces leaf temperature, and slows moisture evaporation. The result in a garden context is a plant that maintains its silver-white presence through summer heat, through drought, through conditions that would cause most plants to look stressed or decline. Hardy in zones 4 through 8. Spreads through stolons that root as they travel, creating expanding silver ground coverage at the front of sunny borders. The year-round value of lamb's ear is most visible in winter. When everything around it has gone brown and dormant, the silver-white woolly leaves stay. They persist through hard weather. They look intentional when everything else looks absent. In zone 6 and warmer, lamb's ear is semi-evergreen through winter, providing silver-white ground-level structure at exactly the time of year when structure at ground level is hardest to find. In winter light, when the surrounding palette has retreated entirely to browns and grays, that lamb's ear silver catches whatever light is available and reflects it back with a luminous presence disproportionate to the actual size of the plants. Planted at the front edge of any border, and it earns its place in the garden every single month, but most dramatically, in the months when everything else has stopped. Plant 5 is catmint, Nepeta x Fassini Walker's Low. The lavender blue bloom from late spring through midsummer is genuinely spectacular and profoundly attractive to bees and hummingbirds. But what earns catmint a place on a year-round evergreen garden list is the foliage. Silvery gray, aromatic, persistently attractive through the entire growing season, and in zones 5 and warmer, semi-evergreen through winter, maintaining soft gray-green ground-level coverage when most of the garden has gone bare. Hardy in zones 4 through 8, spreads through clump expansion and gentle self-seeding, cut back by half after first bloom in July for a second flush of flowers, and a renewal of the compact mounding habit. The aromatic oils in the foliage deter deer and most biting insects, which adds a functional quality to the year-round presence. Plant 6 is Russian sage, Perovskia atriplicifolia. 4 months of luminous blue-purple bloom from July through October on silver-white aromatic stems. And then, when bloom ends, the stems remain. They hold their upright architectural form through winter, providing genuine structural presence when every other plant in the border has collapsed. In a year-round garden design, Russian sage plays a role that is rare and specific. It gives the winter garden vertical architecture without requiring any management or protection. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. 1 task per year, cut back to 6 inches in late February. Every other month it manages its own presence without any help. Plant 7 is Heuchera, coral bells. This plant earns its place on a year-round list because its contribution comes entirely from foliage, and foliage is available every month of the year in a way that flowers are not. Palace purple is deep burgundy that appears almost black in certain light. Lime Ricky is electric chartreuse that makes shaded container corners come alive. Caramel produces warm amber tones that shift throughout the season. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. In zones 7 through 9, evergreen throughout winter. In zones 4 through 6, leaves may flatten during hard freezes but rebound cleanly in spring. spreads slowly through clump expansion, divided every 3 to 4 years to multiply coverage. There is no off-season with Heuchera. It simply continues, month after month, providing the color and the presence that the garden needs from it. Plant 8 is epimedium, barrenwort. This is the plant that experienced shade gardeners consider their most reliable and most underappreciated ground cover. It is genuinely evergreen in zones 5 through 9, providing dense, leathery, weed-suppressing ground coverage through the entire year. It handles dry shade, including the notoriously difficult conditions under the root canopies of large established trees, better than almost any other ornamental ground cover available, and it spreads reliably through rhizomes, expanding its territory at a steady rate that allows it to eventually cover large areas of difficult ground. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, the heart-shaped leaves often show bronze or red coloring when they emerge in spring, shifting to green through summer, then picking up red and bronze again in fall and winter. Small orchid-like flowers in white, yellow, pink, or purple appear in early spring before the new foliage fully emerges. Epimedium establishes slowly, looking modest and unpromising through its first summer, but the rhizome network is developing underground during that first quiet season, building the foundation that supports much more vigorous spread in years 3 and 4. Experienced shade gardeners describe epimedium as slow to start and impossible to stop, which is exactly the growth pattern that produces reliable long-term coverage rather than rapid establishment, followed by stagnation. The combination of year-round evergreen presence, dry shade tolerance, and genuine ornamental value across all 4 seasons makes it one of the most complete year-round garden plants available, and one of the least planted. Plant 9 is Vinca minor, lesser periwinkle. This is the year-round evergreen spreader that requires the most careful placement consideration, because it is so effective at what it does that it can become a management challenge if planted without a clear plan for its boundaries. Vinca minor spreads through trailing stems that root at nodes, creating dense evergreen coverage that is essentially impenetrable to weeds. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, the small star-shaped periwinkle blue flowers in spring are genuinely charming. The foliage is glossy, dark green, and persistent through the entire year in most zones. The reason Vinca requires placement consideration is that it does not stop at garden edges voluntarily. It will move into lawn, through the roots of established shrubs over low borders and into adjacent planting areas if not physically contained. A buried edging strip or a hard material edge, stone, timber, or metal, is advisable along any boundary where you do not want it to cross. Contained correctly, Vinca is among the most effective and beautiful year-round evergreen ground covers available in American horticulture. The variety Bowles Blue offers deeper, more vivid flower color than the standard species. Illumination provides variegated golden and green foliage that brightens shaded areas considerably. Both deliver the coverage benefits of standard Vinca with additional visual interest. Plant 10 is Pachysandra, Pachysandra terminalis. In shade, where year-round green coverage is hardest to achieve, Pachysandra is one of the most reliable solutions available. It spreads through rhizomes to form a dense, weed-suppressing mat of dark green, leathery leaves that maintains its coverage through winter, through summer drought in shade, and through the root competition under established trees that eliminates most other planting options. Hardy in zones 4 through 8, the white flower spikes in early spring are a pleasant bonus. The year-round contribution of Pachysandra is the foliage, the dense, even, consistently dark green carpet that it creates under trees, along shaded building foundations, and in the north-facing areas of any garden where other plants consistently fail. Green sheen is the variety with glossier leaves that reflect more light in shaded conditions, making shaded areas feel slightly brighter. Green carpet is more compact and finer textured, useful where a more refined appearance is desired. If you have a shaded area where you have tried and lost multiple plants over multiple seasons, Pachysandra, planted at 12 to 18 inches apart, will achieve the complete and permanent year-round coverage you have been trying to create. Plant 11 is ornamental grass, specifically the varieties that are evergreen or semi-evergreen in most American growing zones. Blue fescue, Festuca glauca, forms compact blue-gray mounds at 10 to 12 inches that hold their color through winter in zones 4 through 8, providing blue-gray ground-level structure when every other garden color has retreated. Carl Förster. Feather reed grass is not evergreen but holds its golden winter structure at 4 to 5 feet, and that structure gives the year-round garden the one thing that most evergreen ground covers cannot provide: height variation and movement in the wind. Cut ornamental grasses back to 4 to 6 inches in late February. That is the annual maintenance requirement for a plant that earns its place in every month of the year. Plant 12 is sweet woodruff, Galium odoratum. Under deciduous trees, in dappled shade, in the quiet corners of a garden where fine texture and fragrance matter as much as visual presence, sweet woodruff spreads through rhizomes to create a dense, low, weed-suppressing carpet, hardy in zones 4 through 8. The tiny white star-shaped flowers in spring are fragrant and charming. The whorled leaves smell of hay and vanilla when crushed, a fragrance valued in European gardens for centuries and used historically to scent linen and flavor certain traditional beverages. In zones 5 and warmer, the foliage persists through winter, providing fine textured evergreen coverage at exactly the height where it reads most beautifully from a garden path. In a woodland garden, a tapestry planting of sweet woodruff, epimedium and ajuga, each occupying slightly different niches in the same shaded area, creates textural and seasonal richness that any single ground cover used alone cannot match. The sweet woodruff provides fine texture and fragrance at the lowest layer. The epimedium provides broader leathery leaves and early spring flowers at the middle layer. The ajuga provides dramatic foliage color and vivid blue flower spikes at the upper edge of the ground layer. Together they cover the ground completely, suppress weeds year-round, and provide genuine visual interest across all 4 seasons without any of them interfering destructively with the others. Now, putting these plants together into a year-round garden requires thinking differently from how most gardening is taught. Instead of planning around bloom sequences, plan around coverage layers. What covers the ground in winter? What provides height without depending on flowers? What transitions from the bare spots of winter to the abundance of summer without leaving gaps? The evergreen and semi-evergreen spreading perennials on this list answer those questions with plants that require almost no annual intervention beyond the occasional division or trim. Consider the coverage layers available from this list. At ground level, creeping phlox, ajuga, creeping jenny, pachysandra, and sweet woodruff provide continuous coverage in varying conditions from full sun to deep shade. At the mid-border level, lamb's ear, heuchera, and catmint provide color and texture from foliage that persists across seasons. At the upper level, Russian sage and Karl Förster grass provide the vertical architecture that gives a border its structure and prevents the flat appearance that ground-covering plantings can create without thoughtful layering. Combining plants from each layer creates the impression of a garden that is always complete, always present, always doing something worth looking at. The year-round garden is not more work than a seasonal garden. It is different work, done earlier with plants chosen for different qualities. Once established, these plants manage much of their own coverage, expanding steadily into the spaces they are given, suppressing the weeds that would otherwise require your attention, maintaining the green presence that makes a garden feel alive regardless of the season. There is a specific pleasure in the year-round evergreen garden that seasonal gardeners rarely experience. It is the pleasure of January, the month when most gardens are at their most discouraging, and looking out at a garden that still has something to say. The silver of lamb's ear along the path, the chartreuse glow of creeping jenny at the shaded corner, the upright silver stems of Russian sage holding their form against a gray winter sky, the dark glossy carpet of vinca maintaining its presence under the bare trees, the blue-gray mounds of fescue catching thin winter light. None of these are dramatic displays, but collectively they create the impression that the garden is alive, present, continuous, that it did not end in October and will not begin again in April, that it simply continued as living things do through the quiet months. That is the year-round garden, and it starts with these plants, chosen not just for what they do at their peak, but for what they do when everything else has stopped. The garden never fully sleeps, and neither does the pleasure of looking at it from your window in January and seeing something worth looking at. Drop a comment telling me which of these plants you are planning to add to your garden this season, and what USDA zone or state you are gardening in. I read every comment. Give this a thumbs up if it changed how you think about year-round garden design, and subscribe for practical plant science and gardening content every single week.